Bob Giddings here again, and in the next three sections, myself and Professor Pope will be talking to you about the history, ethnicity, and music of Chicago. It's often said that Americans are people on the move, and you can see this really clearly on the roads leading to and from Chicago. The web of roads and railroads of the United States, from the west, the south, and the east, all connect in the city of Chicago. Chicago is also the most southwestern point in the Great Lakes, and for more than 100 years has been the connecting point between the Great Lakes and the other great waterway of North America, the Mississippi River. This city, with its roots 200 years ago in a small settlement at the southern tip of Lake Michigan, has become a major center of trade, industry, transportation, finance, and the arts. One reason for Chicago's growth is its position between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi, the west and the east. Its history begins with a trading post started by an African-American trader, Jean-Baptiste Point de Sable, in the 1770s. Chicago became a city in 1833. In 1848, a canal was built between Chicago and the Illinois River, which connected the city and the Great Lakes to the Mississippi. Starting in the 1860s, transcontinental railroads passed through Chicago, linking the east of the U.S. to the newly developing corn and wheat fields of the west to Chicago markets. Cattle from the southwest would be brought by railroad to Chicago stockyards. Cattle, hogs, and sheep would be butchered in the city's meatpacking plants, and the meat shipped to the cities of the east by railroad. As the city became a center of industry, people also began to arrive by railroad. In the late 1800s, immigrants came to Chicago directly from the East Coast and created their own special neighborhoods in the city. Irish, German, Greek, Polish, Italian, Swedish, and Chinese neighborhoods grew up, each with their own customs, churches, restaurants, and political organizations. In the early 1900s, African Americans began to come from the south to the north in search of new opportunities, jobs, and freedom from Southern racism. This was called the Great Migration. Many of them settled in the south side of Chicago and created a vibrant culture there, especially musical culture, with the development of a particular style of Chicago jazz and blues. But the North had its own form of racism and segregation. Social segregation and segregation by neighborhood were strong. In 1919, when a black teenager was killed for swimming in an all-white beach, the city burst into riots. The riots left 38 people dead, 537 people injured, and approximately 1,000 homeless. After 3 days of rioting, 6,000 troops had to be called in to stop the rioters at gunpoint. Ethnic politics also controlled the city government. A democratic political machine based on white ethnic politics rewarded its supporters with jobs and city services. African American neighborhoods received few services, almost no city jobs, and substandard, overcrowded schools. Blacks were not allowed to rent or buy housing in white neighborhoods. Neighborhoods quickly became either all black or all white, with no in-between allowed. As the African American population of the city continued to grow, the problems caused by segregation of housing and education became severe. In the 1960s, Martin Luther King Jr. led a movement in Chicago for equal or fair housing. I asked Sally Kobayashi, who grew up in Chicago but now lives in Sapporo, Japan, to tell me her experience of the city.
Let's see, when I was in kindergarten, I went to a school that was fairly integrated. My best friend was the girl next door, Judy, who was an African-American girl. And it seemed like we ended up playing with each other. And we somehow didn't get to mix with the other kids. And I remember one time we wanted to play in the dollhouse, and the teacher said it was crowded, and the same kids always got to play in there. And the teacher said, well, you and Judy should play with the ball. So we just had to play by ourselves. And I don't know if that had anything to do with racism or not, because I was only like 5 years old.
At 5, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
But there's a chance.
But then now, when I think of it, you know. And then my family moved, and it was an all-white neighborhood. And my father had an apartment building, and sometimes he needed help, like painting or redecorating. And he would hire these African-American guys that worked in the restaurant, you know, to come on Saturday or Sunday just for extra side money. And they came to help. And afterwards, my parents got a visit from I guess he's like the head of the block association or something. And they wanted to know, were my parents going to rent apartments to African Americans? And they were kind of upset about it, you know. So that's when it was like, oh, I could see that there was this anti-feeling, you
know. What time period about was this?
It was like middle of the 1950s.
Okay.
And the neighborhood was just starting to change. So by the time I graduated in 1959, it was like an awe. But when I was in elementary school, I was really interested in different schools. And when I was going into high school, I didn't think my high school was very good because the standards had gone down. And I used to compare high schools with kids that I knew who went to other schools, you know, like, what are you studying now? And things I'd never even heard of, you know. And we were, in elementary school, we were put on double shift. First I was in a floating room. The class met in the morning in the library, and then the other students couldn't have any use of the library. And then in the afternoon, our class met in the home economics room. So then other students in the school couldn't use it because they wouldn't let us go to other schools. I mean, like schools on the border.
All between different neighborhoods.
Yeah, might not be so crowded, but they wouldn't let students go there because they were African American. You know? And then we went on double shift, like 4 hours in the morning and then 4 hours in the afternoon. So then when I went into high school, they brought in what the parents labeled Willis wagons. They were trailers, and we had to go have classes in the trailers because it was overcrowded, but they wouldn't let us, you know, like, if kids were, like, living on the border, they could have gone to another school, but they wouldn't let them, you know, and it's like segregation, you know.
So then, pretty much your elementary and high school was pretty much all African American?
Let's see. When I was in elementary school, the first African American student came to our school when I was in second grade, and the teacher sent him on an errand. And after he was out of the classroom, she told us that we should all be friends with him. And I didn't know why, because it was, why would she think we're not going to be friends? Yeah. But then it's because he was African American, you know. So it was, and then in high school, because I was like maybe one of 3 kids who wasn't African American, it was like I became teacher's pet. It's because I was always teacher's helper for this, teacher's helper for that, and you know. Instead of having to sign up for study hall, they would sign me out so I could do their errands or be their assistant or whatever. So I don't think that was very good. At the time, I was like glad to get out of
anything
class.
to get out of study hall.
Yeah, but that was not very good because I didn't really learn good study habits.
Yeah.
I found out later in college, you know. So I think that was not good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but it seems that you pretty much got along well with kids and stuff like that, and that generally.
Yeah, but our school wasn't really diversified because it changed so quickly.
So,
And in Chicago schools, you know, they had a lot of rivalry and race riots, not just between like black and white, but like the Swedish kids and the Jewish kids. Their schools would have big fights and stuff like that.
So then would there be like a high school that was mostly Swedish and a high school that was mostly Jewish? Oh, so neighborhoods were very, very, very distinct.
Oh yeah, and so when I was in high school and I got a driver's license, I would take my mother shopping, and if you went to go grocery shopping in a Jewish neighborhood, the products were really good, like the produce and the meat, everything was fresh. But if you went shopping in a African American neighborhood, you know, they would have like day-old bread, and they'd take all the stuff they couldn't sell it in the other stores and bring them, you know, because they were chain stores.
Yeah.
And when I was in college, I remember one of my teachers, I took a nutrition class, and our teacher was talking about that. And I knew what she was talking about, and I agreed with her. And one of the students, oh, no, that can't be. And my teacher got so frustrated. She said, I have a special assignment for you. You go to this store and you check it out. And then she was afraid to go to the black neighborhoods. And so she had her boyfriend go with her. And then she came back the next week with her report. You're right. So it's like this difference in not just schools, but just economic things too. That's really, yeah, because the people there didn't have the economic ability to protest or complain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And Chicago has distinct neighborhoods. This is a Polish neighborhood. This is this neighborhood. Because I remember when one of our college friends, there were three of us that were very close. One friend is Jewish. One friend is of German background, German Catholic, and me. So our friend, the first one that got married, is the girl who is German Catholic background, and she moved to she and her new husband got an apartment in a certain neighborhood, which we knew was kind of a racist neighborhood. And my Jewish friend said to her, all right, now do Sally and I have to get passports and visas to visit you? And I thought it was a funny comment. And our other friend just didn't understand it. You know?
On the other hand, as Ms. Kobayashi also mentioned, the wealth of the city's businesses was invested in the creation of museums, beautiful public parks, and some of the most beautiful architecture in the country. The Art Institute, the Field Museum, and the Planetarium are just a few of the city's world-class museums. The first skyscraper, the Home Insurance Building, was built here in 1885. Frank Lloyd Wright, one of the most noted American architects, who established the Prairie School of Architecture, lived and worked in Chicago. There are still very strong racial tensions in Chicago today, just as there are in most other parts of the United States. But there have also been changes for the better in the city. Harold Lee Washington became the first African-American mayor of Chicago, serving from 1983 until his death in 1987. The city has actively tried to change the racist image it had in the 1950s and 60s. Maybe one way we can see the changes reflected is in the All-American sport of baseball at the home of the Chicago White Sox, Cellular Field. Professional baseball is very popular in the United States, and Americans from elementary school age to senior citizens also play baseball themselves in neighborhood teams. 50 years ago, the players were almost all white, and the crowds have changed too.
Most of them are on the 12 for like teachers' canvas.
Each game starts off with everyone standing to listen to the national anthem.
Singing our national anthem on behalf of U.S. Postal Employee Night.
Oh, Postal Employee Night. Uh-oh, let's go Postal.
Selling hot dogs, cheering your favorite players. Nothing has changed? Or has it?